I remember the day I bought the house as if it were the prologue to a fairy tale. A Mediterranean-style villa nestled in an exclusive neighborhood, its whitewashed walls and terracotta accents promising a future of beauty and stability. I spared no expense. Every brick, every polished floor tile, every panoramic window was chosen with a precision that spoke of my unwavering belief in the dream life I was building with Olivia. In my mind, this house was not merely a structure of stone and mortar but the embodiment of our shared destiny. A place where we would grow old together, where laughter and love would seep into every corner, and where our names, forever etched on a custom nameplate reading Ethan and Olivia Carter, would serve as a constant reminder of the legacy we intended to create. I recall the moment vividly. Olivia twirled through the spacious, sunlit rooms with an unbridled enthusiasm that was almost contagious. She made plans for extravagant dinner parties under the soft glow of chandeliers, for vacations where we would explore faraway lands, and for quiet evenings on the veranda, savoring the gentle caress of the ocean breeze. Her eyes sparkled with dreams as she whispered to me, "This is our dream life, Ethan." And in that instance I believed her completely. I believed every word, every promise, and every hope we had invested in our future. I walked through the corridors of that magnificent home feeling invincible, secure in the knowledge that every detail had been meticulously crafted to guarantee our happiness. The polished floors, the custom cabinetry, and the expansive windows that offered breathtaking views of the rolling hills outside. All of it was a testament to the future I had envisioned for us. Yet, even as I reveled in the glory of our new beginning, a subtle disquiet began to creep into the recesses of my mind. A faint whisper that perhaps the foundation upon which we were building was not as unassailable as I believed. I dismissed it at the time, attributing it to the natural jitters of such a monumental purchase, confident that the tangible beauty of our home would soon erase any lingering doubts. Little did I know that the villa, which I had once regarded as a sanctuary, would soon become the stage upon which my most profound humiliation would unfold. The walls that were meant to echo with joyful laughter would instead bear witness to secrets and betrayals so deep that they would shatter the very notion of the life I thought I knew. Over time, as the days turned to weeks and the promise of our shared future began to reveal its hidden fissures, I came to understand that love has a peculiar way of blinding you to the truth. I had built that home with every ounce of my determination and every dollar in my pocket, convinced that it was the physical manifestation of our eternal bond, a fortress that would protect us from the vicissitudes of life. But as the years passed, I discovered that the very foundation I had laid was impregnated with betrayal, a betrayal that would ultimately unravel the fabric of everything I held dear. I began to recall the subtle hints that I had once dismissed as coincidences, the moments when Olivia's eyes seemed to dart away as if hiding a secret, the casual way in which she planned our future that never quite involved me in the decisions as much as it did in the fantasies she painted on the walls of our new home. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world outside was hushed and I lay awake listening to the distant hum of the city, I would find myself questioning the dreams we had built together. Had I been too blinded by ambition and the lure of success to see the warning signs? Had I invested so completely in the material trappings of our life that I failed to notice the cracks forming in the veneer of our happiness? The home that once symbolized our future slowly transformed in my eyes into a monument of humiliation. A constant reminder that even the grandest dreams can be marred by the sharp edge of betrayal. I began to see that the polished floors and gleaming windows were not enough to hide the underlying rot that had been sown in our relationship, a rot that I had ignored in my fervor to create a perfect life. Every time I walked through those elegant halls, I was forced to confront the painful truth that the paradise we had built was nothing more than an elaborate illusion, a facade that could crumble under the weight of unspoken lies and unhealed wounds. I tried to convince myself that the beauty of the villa was enough to sustain us, that the future I had so meticulously planned would eventually overcome the darkness that threatened to seep in. But as I stood in the silence of what should have been our sanctuary, I could no longer ignore the painful realization that the house was not a symbol of our eternal bond. It was the setting for my greatest humiliation, the place where the true nature of our love would be exposed in all its painful, unforgiving reality. That day, when I first stepped through the front door with dreams in my eyes and hope in my heart, I had believed that every brick laid and every window installed was a promise of a future built on trust and mutual devotion. Instead, I learned that sometimes, the very things you cherish most can become instruments of betrayal, marking the beginning of a journey that would force you to confront the harsh truth that love, no matter how fervently believed, can also be the source of your deepest, most unrelenting humiliation. And as I look back on that day now, with the weight of years and the scars of betrayal upon my soul, I realize that the house I built was never truly a home for two hearts in harmony. It was the stage for a tragic drama of deception that would forever alter the course of my life. I still recall the crisp envelope that arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, its weight and the embossed lettering hinting at a destiny that would forever alter the course of my life. The letter informed me of a $2 million inheritance, money that had flowed into my hands with an almost miraculous timing, promising security, an unassailable cushion for our future, and the assurance that Olivia would never have to worry about financial constraints again. I had always prided myself on being diligent and prudent with money. Every dollar was carefully accounted for, every investment scrutinized with the precision of a man who believed that wealth was the key to stability. For me, that inheritance was not just a windfall but a symbol of promise, a tangible representation of the future I had fought so hard to secure for us. In my mind, it meant that our lives would now be free from the mundane worries of everyday existence, that the villa we had so painstakingly built would be filled with the laughter of our children and the joyful banter of friends gathered for extravagant dinner parties. I remember the way my heart swelled with pride and hope as I looked over the accounts, envisioning a future where every need was met and every desire fulfilled. And yet, as the days passed, it became painfully evident that money, for all its potential to create security, also has a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention. Almost immediately after receiving the inheritance, subtle changes began to ripple through our lives. I watched with a growing sense of unease as Olivia's demeanor shifted. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, now sparkled with a hunger that I could not quite decipher. At first, I dismissed it as excitement, a natural reaction to the sudden abundance of wealth. But as time wore on, I began to notice the details. The way she lingered over glossy magazine pages showcasing designer clothes, the secretive glances she exchanged with acquaintances whose names I did not recognize, and the spontaneous declarations of desire to experience luxury vacations and exclusive events that had always seemed out of reach. I told myself that she was simply reveling in the newfound abundance, that she had never before experienced a level of wealth so profound that it could change the way one viewed the world. Yet even as I tried to rationalize these changes, I could not shake the sense that something was terribly amiss. The money that was meant to be a source of security for our future was slowly becoming the catalyst for a transformation in Olivia, a transformation that I had no part in, but one that was reshaping our lives in ways that threatened to undermine everything we had built. I began to notice that our conversations, once filled with plans for a shared future, were increasingly dominated by discussions of acquisitions and expenditures. Olivia's eyes would light up at the mere mention of a designer label, and her laughter, once a warm melody in our home, now carried an edge of careless indulgence. I tried to hold on to the belief that the inheritance was a blessing, a means to elevate our lives to new heights, but as I watched her spend lavishly, seemingly without restraint, I realized that money had a corrupting power that extended far beyond the mere act of spending. It had the insidious ability to warp desires, to alter priorities, and to reveal the true nature of those who had long enjoyed the comforts of stability. Every expensive purchase, every impulsive decision to splurge on a luxury vacation or a piece of designer jewelry, chipped away at the foundation of trust that I had so carefully built. I found myself questioning whether the inheritance was truly the gift I had always imagined, or whether it was the beginning of a downward spiral, a catalyst that would ultimately lead to the unraveling of the very life we had so meticulously planned together. With each passing day, the promise of security was overshadowed by a growing sense of foreboding, a realization that the money, once seen as a blessing, was now turning our lives into a battleground of conflicting desires. I watched as Olivia's priorities shifted, her once tender care for our home replaced by an insatiable desire to flaunt wealth and embrace a lifestyle that left little room for the simple, shared joys we had once cherished. In the quiet solitude of late nights, as I pored over financial statements and tried to reconcile the stark numbers with the emotional landscape of our lives, I came to understand that this inheritance was not merely a windfall, it was a turning point. It was the moment when the delicate balance of our marriage, so carefully maintained over years of mutual trust and quiet ambition, began to tilt irreparably. And as I sat there, heart heavy with the burden of both newfound wealth and the growing chasm between us, I realized that money, for all its promise of security, could also become the instrument of our destruction. The inheritance that was meant to secure our future had instead sown the seeds of betrayal, leaving me to wonder if the cost of prosperity was the loss of the very things that made life worth living. In that long, sleepless night spent wrestling with my thoughts and the relentless figures on the screen, I vowed that I would find a way to protect the future I had worked so hard to build, even if it meant confronting the painful truths that were now emerging from the shadows of our once perfect life. Looking back, I now realize how many subtle red flags I ignored in my desperate attempt to preserve the illusion of our perfect life. There were the late nights when Olivia would receive mysterious phone calls, her tone guarded as she whispered into the receiver, always careful to hold the phone face down so I could not see who was on the other end. At first, I brushed it off as the quirks of a woman newly acclimated to an extravagant lifestyle, a harmless habit born of excitement and the thrill of newfound wealth. I wanted to trust her completely. I wanted to believe that everything was as it appeared, that the life we had built together was impervious to the petty doubts that sometimes plagued even the strongest of relationships. Yet, as the nights grew longer and the calls more frequent, I began to notice the subtle shifts. The way Olivia's smile would fade into something unreadable whenever her phone buzzed, the furtive glances she cast toward the device as if it held secrets too dangerous to reveal. Then there was him, James, a man I first encountered at a charity gala that Olivia had insisted we attend. I remember that evening vividly. The venue was resplendent with glittering lights and the hum of polite conversation, and I felt a surge of pride as I stood beside Olivia, who radiated an air of sophistication and charm. It was then that she introduced me to James with an almost languid casualness that immediately set my nerves on edge. "Ethan, this is James," she had said, her hand lingering on his arm a second too long, a gesture that felt more intimate than any I had witnessed before. James was impeccably dressed, his charm effortless and his smile disarming, yet there was something about him that triggered a deep, instinctive alarm inside me, a sense that he was not merely a benign presence, but someone whose intentions were shrouded in layers of cunning and ambition. I tried to rationalize my discomfort, telling myself that jealousy or insecurity might be clouding my judgment, that perhaps Olivia's fondness for this man was nothing more than friendly banter. I wanted to believe in the sanctity of our marriage, to trust that the red flags I was noticing were nothing more than overactive imaginations fueled by my own hopes for a perfect life. But as time passed, the signs grew too blatant to ignore. The late nights turned into early mornings filled with hushed arguments and evasive answers, and Olivia's once innocent behavior began to take on a pattern that screamed of secrecy. I recalled moments when I would catch her quickly sliding her phone into her purse as if to hide a damning message, or times when I would find her in a conversation with James long after the gala lights had dimmed, their words laced with an intimacy that should have belonged only to the two of us. And then came that fateful night, the night I arrived home to find the doors locked, a security guard standing in my own entryway as if I were a stranger to my own property. That night, as I struggled to comprehend the surreal scene unfolding before me, every red flag I had previously ignored converged into a single, devastating truth. I discovered that Olivia had been orchestrating a secret life behind my back, one that involved clandestine meetings, whispered conversations, and an ever-growing connection with James that transcended the bounds of simple friendship. In my blind desire to believe that our love was unbreakable, I had dismissed every subtle cue, every slight change in her demeanor, as insignificant details in an otherwise perfect tapestry. I wanted so desperately to trust her, to cling to the vision of our future that I had so painstakingly built, that I overlooked the mounting evidence of betrayal. As the reality of that night settled in and the shock of being locked out of my own home left me numb, I understood that my failure to heed those red flags had been my greatest mistake, a mistake that had paved the way for the humiliation and betrayal that would soon define the rest of my life. In the silence that followed, as I watched Olivia step out onto the porch with a cold, calculated smile and James by her side, I felt the crushing weight of realization press down upon me. Every moment of doubt, every whisper of suspicion I had ignored, now coalesced into a painful, inescapable truth. I had been blind, and in my blindness, I had allowed my dreams to be shattered. I could no longer deny that the life we had built, the home that was once a symbol of our shared future, had become the very arena in which my trust had been betrayed and my dignity stripped away. And so, standing there in the darkness of that fateful night, I vowed that I would no longer allow my heart to be deceived by illusions. I promised myself that I would be more vigilant, that I would no longer ignore the red flags waving in plain sight, even if it meant confronting a truth so painful that it threatened to destroy everything I once held dear. That day had started with the promise of success and celebration. I had just closed a major business deal that not only secured the financial future I had so meticulously planned, but also reaffirmed my sense of accomplishment. I was riding a wave of euphoria, eager to share the news with Olivia and celebrate our achievements as a family. But as I pulled into the driveway of our villa, a home that had been my proudest investment and the cornerstone of our shared dreams, I was immediately struck by an unsettling stillness. The grand entrance that had once welcomed me with familiar warmth now felt alien, as if I were an unwelcome intruder in the place I had built with all my heart. Approaching the front door, I noticed a uniformed security guard I had never seen before, standing resolutely by the entrance as if guarding something precious that I no longer had access to. With a calm that belied the storm raging inside me, I greeted him, stating simply, "Good evening, I live here." I reached for the keypad, ready to punch in the entry code I had memorized, confident in the knowledge that this house was mine by right. But before I could complete the sequence, the guard stepped forward, blocking my path with an authority that left no room for argument. In a measured tone that was both disarming and chilling, he said, "I'm sorry, sir. You are not authorized to enter." My heart skipped a beat. I repeated, "Excuse me? I am the homeowner." The guard's response was firm and final. "I have explicit instructions from the homeowner." At that moment, my mind reeled. The homeowner was supposed to be me. I stood there in disbelief, my fingers hovering over the keypad as a sick feeling settled deep within my gut. Then, as if to confirm the unthinkable, I heard laughter echoing from within. Peering through the grand windows that I had paid a fortune for, I saw them, Olivia and a man I had come to loathe, James. They lounged on the plush sofa in my living room, casually drinking champagne as if this were a casual family gathering. I felt a surge of cold fury mixed with utter humiliation as I watched them, their carefree demeanor mocking the life that I had painstakingly built. The sight was surreal. My wife, the woman I had once believed to be my partner in every dream and aspiration, now wore a silk robe and stepped onto the porch with bare, perfectly manicured feet glistening on the marble tiles. Her smile was neither warm nor inviting. It was calculated, almost contemptuous, as she greeted me with the cold words, "Thanks for the $2 million inheritance." Behind her, James smirked and casually swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his eyes gleaming with triumph as he added, "Good luck starting from scratch." I felt every ounce of my pride and dignity being trampled underfoot. I stood there, speechless, absorbing the magnitude of their betrayal. In that moment, I realized that they expected me to erupt in anger, to scream, beg, or fight my way back into what was once my domain. But instead of a roar of fury, I found myself smiling slowly, a quiet, vengeful smile that masked the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I turned away from the window, every step heavy with the knowledge that they had taken something far more precious than a house. They had stolen my very life, my future, and my identity as the man who had once built it all with unwavering determination. And so, With a calm that belied the fury churning within, I walked away, leaving them to believe that they had won. But deep inside, I was already formulating a plan. A plan that would ensure that when the time came, they would have no choice but to face the full consequences of their betrayal. I knew then that I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, that I would not allow this humiliation to define me. I walked away from that porch with a promise to myself, a promise that I would not only rebuild my life from the ashes of their treachery, but that I would do so with a vengeance so complete that they would regret the day they ever decided to lock me out of my own life. In the days that followed that bitter night, as I grappled with the searing sting of betrayal and the crushing realization that my life had been upended by Olivia and James, a cold determination began to settle in the depths of my soul. They thought they had won, that by stripping me of my home, my money, and my dignity, they could force me into submission and make me a silent bystander in their reckless game. But they had gravely underestimated the fire that now burned within me. I knew that I would not yell, I would not beg, and I would certainly not allow myself to be reduced to a quivering wreck before the people who had stolen everything from me. Instead, I resolved to bury them, not metaphorically, but by dismantling every piece of the life they had so carelessly stolen. I began by crafting a meticulous plan for revenge, a strategy that would unfold in 3 decisive steps. First, I needed to gather every shred of information I could. The financial records, the bank statements, the forged documents that had allowed them to transfer ownership of what was rightfully mine. Every detail, every email, every whispered conversation would be scrutinized and turned into evidence that would bring them crashing down. I spent countless hours combing through digital files, revisiting old emails, and meeting discreetly with trusted friends and advisors who had once believed in our shared vision. Every piece of the puzzle added to a growing dossier that would eventually serve as the foundation for my counterattack. The second step was to freeze their assets. I contacted my lawyer, Victor, whose unwavering calm in the face of chaos reassured me that justice was not only possible but inevitable. I directed him to move swiftly to freeze all accounts linked to Olivia and James, to challenge any and all transactions that smacked of fraud or deceit. Every dollar they had siphoned from our accounts, every luxury purchase made with the money meant for our future, would be locked away, inaccessible to those who had thought themselves above the law. And then, in the third and final phase of my plan, I would watch as the empire they had built on lies crumbled around them, piece by piece. I envisioned a slow, inexorable collapse where their world would come crashing down, exposing every hidden fraud and every meticulously executed betrayal for all to see. I spent days meticulously planning, setting up meetings with forensic accountants and investigators, laying the groundwork for a legal onslaught that would leave no doubt as to the extent of their treachery. I rehearsed every step in my mind, each moment of my plan unfolding with the precision of a well-orchestrated symphony of retribution. Every detail of their betrayal, the secret phone calls, the suspicious glances, the undeniable chemistry between Olivia and James, was now fuel for my determination to reclaim what was mine. I felt a surge of dark exhilaration as I realized that by the time they would realize what was happening, it would already be too late. They had no idea that the man they had so casually dismissed, the man they thought was broken and defeated, was already building the framework of their downfall. I resolved to let them beg, to let them stammer their desperate pleas for mercy, while I silently reveled in the knowledge that every move they had made would come back to haunt them. With each passing day, as I gathered evidence and watched the trap tighten around them, I felt my sense of purpose crystallize into a single, unyielding truth. I would not allow their betrayal to define me. I would transform it into the very weapon that would bring them to their knees. The plan for revenge was no longer just a thought. It was an imperative, a mission born from the deepest parts of my wounded soul. And so, with a calm exterior that belied the raging storm within, I began the slow, methodical process of turning the tables, knowing that in the end, they would learn that trust, once broken, is a debt that must be repaid in full. I remember the moment I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Victor, as if it were etched in time. My voice was steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions that churned inside me. "Ethan," he said after listening carefully to the litany of betrayals I recounted, "this isn't just about personal betrayal, it's fraud." His words resonated with an unsettling clarity. I learned that Olivia and James had not merely stolen my house by locking me out. They had transferred ownership through forged documents, an act so calculated that it left no room for ambiguity. As if that were not enough, I discovered that every dollar I had painstakingly saved, every ounce of our financial security, had been funneled into an offshore shell company they controlled. They had emptied my bank accounts with a precision that was almost clinical, leaving behind not just a void of money but the shattering realization that they had robbed me blind. The numbers on the screen did not lie. The inheritance, the funds I had believed would secure our future, were now the instruments of my undoing. It was as if the very promise of wealth had been turned against me, a betrayal measured in dollars and cents that cut deeper than any emotional wound. In the cold light of that financial nightmare, I spent long, sleepless nights poring over bank statements and financial records, each transaction a dagger that confirmed the extent of their deceit. The 529 plan, which had been the cornerstone of our daughter's future. A meticulously built fund meant to secure their education and our legacy, had been decimated, drained of over $500,000 in a matter of months. Every line on those statements was a testament to the extravagance of their lifestyle. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, private jet rentals, and mysterious wire transfers to offshore accounts that seemed to vanish into thin air. I could scarcely comprehend the magnitude of it all. $775,000 gone, swallowed by a labyrinth of financial deception. With each figure, I felt a burning fury rising inside me, a determination that I would not let their betrayal go unpunished. I could almost hear the echo of every fraudulent transfer, every unauthorized purchase, reverberating in the silent room as I vowed to use this damning paper trail against them. The trap they had carelessly left behind was my salvation, a web of evidence that would expose their crimes for all to see. I began to work closely with forensic accountants and financial investigators, every meeting a small victory in the battle to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I knew that the dumbest mistake they made was leaving behind this paper trail, and I intended to exploit it fully. With every call, every email, every piece of evidence gathered, I felt the momentum of justice building, like an avalanche gathering force as it rolled down a mountainside. I could already envision the day when their empire of lies would collapse, and they would be forced to face the full consequences of their actions. In that dimly lit study, surrounded by the hum of my computer and the rustle of documents that held the secrets of our stolen future, I felt a resolve so strong it nearly overwhelmed me. I was not merely fighting for revenge. I was fighting to restore the legacy that had been so callously torn from my grasp, to rebuild the future for my daughters, and to prove that no matter how deeply betrayal may cut, there is always a way to reclaim what is rightfully yours. The financial trap was set, and I could feel the noose tightening around Olivia and James, each frozen account and every forged document a step closer to their inevitable downfall. I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges and legal battles, but I was ready to wage war on a system that had once seemed invincible. With every piece of evidence I collected, I was reclaiming a part of myself, a part that refused to be defined by their treachery. And in that relentless pursuit of justice, I discovered that the cold, hard truth of numbers could sometimes be the most potent weapon of all. The following morning, as dawn crept over the horizon, I could feel the noose of my meticulously laid plan tightening around Olivia and James. My lawyer Victor had moved with lightning speed, freezing all accounts associated with them and challenging the fraudulent documents that had stolen my home. I watched, almost in disbelief, as the legal machinery I had set in motion began to work its inexorable magic. Every phone call, every signed affidavit, every meeting with forensic accountants sent a clear message. The walls were closing in, and there was nowhere left for them to hide. I sat in my temporary office, a modest hotel suite that had become my headquarters for the battle ahead, studying the documents and legal notices that accumulated like building blocks of their imminent downfall. I could see the trap unfolding with chilling clarity. Their financial empire, once built on the foundation of deceit and stolen trust, was crumbling under the weight of evidence. James's financial records were now under intense investigation for fraud, and the forged signatures that had transferred the house from my name to theirs were being scrutinized by experts. The feeling was surreal, as if I were watching a slow-motion replay of every moment I had ignored. The late nights, the secret calls, the red flags that I had dismissed in my desperate desire to believe in our shared dream. I could almost hear the quiet panic in their voices as they began to realize that their carefully constructed facade was disintegrating. Every legal notice, every frozen account, every mounting piece of evidence was like a nail in the coffin of their treachery. I found myself waiting with a mixture of anticipation and grim satisfaction, knowing that by the time they fully comprehended the magnitude of their downfall, it would be too late to salvage anything of the life they had built on lies. The trap was set with meticulous precision, and all that remained was to watch as the walls closed in. I revisited every conversation, every overlooked detail, and with each recollection, my resolve hardened further. I could almost taste the retribution that was coming, a slow, inexorable collapse that would leave them exposed, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. It was in that quiet, tense morning, with the soft hum of the city awakening outside my window, that I understood the true power of patience and calculated action. I sat there, steeling myself for the inevitable showdown, knowing that each step of my plan was a step toward reclaiming the life that had been stolen from me. I was no longer the man who had blindly trusted. I was now the orchestrator of a symphony of justice, where every note was a declaration that betrayal would not go unpunished. As the hours passed, the trap continued to tighten, and I could feel the weight of their impending collapse bearing down on me. I waited, silent and resolute, knowing that the moment when their empire of deceit would finally crumble was drawing near, and with it, the beginning of a long-overdue reckoning. It did not take long for the consequences of their actions to manifest in the physical world. At exactly 9 a.m., I heard a frantic knocking on the door of my modest hotel suite, a knock that seemed to vibrate with urgency and desperation. I took a deep, measured breath before opening the door, uncertain of what to expect. Standing on the threshold were Olivia and James, their faces etched with panic and dismay. Olivia, once so confident and composed, now appeared pale and trembling, her eyes darting nervously as if seeking forgiveness in a moment of despair. James, on the other hand, looked every bit the man who realized that his carefully constructed facade was crumbling. His hair was disheveled, his eyes wide with the realization that he was about to lose everything. As they stood there, their voices overlapping in a desperate plea, "Ethan, please, we need to talk." I leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed and a calm, almost icy smile playing on my lips. "Oh," I replied softly, my tone measured yet dripping with a quiet vindication. "You mean the money you stole? Or the house you forged my signature for?" Their expressions faltered, and Olivia quickly wiped away tears that threatened to spill over, her voice quavering as she attempted to explain, "You don't understand." Before she could continue, I interrupted with a quiet finality, "No, Olivia, I understand perfectly." James raked a hand through his hair, his tone tight with desperation as he stammered, "Listen, man, we just need a little help. We can fix this." I allowed them to speak, to beg and stammer, all the while my mind churning with the knowledge that every word they uttered was a confession of their crimes. After what felt like an eternity of pleas and desperate attempts to salvage a shattered dream, I stepped aside and said simply, "Come in." As they hesitantly crossed the threshold into the room that I now considered a symbol of their betrayal, I let them know, in every subtle gesture and every cool glance, that their time to beg for mercy was over. I listened silently to their futile attempts to explain, to offer reasons that I already knew were hollow, and as the reality of their predicament sank in, I realized that they had no idea what was coming next. I was not going to help criminals. I was going to see them fall, piece by piece, as the full weight of their treachery came crashing down upon them. And so, as I watched Olivia's eyes fill with a mixture of regret and terror, and James's facade of control crumble before me, I knew that I had taken the first decisive step toward reclaiming the life that had been stolen from me, and that from that moment on, the tables had turned irreversibly. They believed, in their desperation, that I would somehow save them from the inevitable consequences of their actions. They had no inkling that I was prepared not only to reclaim what was mine, but also to finish them completely. No sooner had they stepped into my room than another knock echoed through the corridor. A knock that heralded the arrival of 2 federal agents. I watched, detached yet satisfied, as the agents, in precise and swift movements, took control of the situation. In the ensuing chaos, Marcus, a shadowy figure who had been lurking behind the scenes, lunged in a futile attempt to salvage something from the wreckage, only to be shoved forcefully against the wall by the agents. Olivia's terrified scream, "Ethan, please," rang out, a plea that was both heartbreaking and meaningless in the face of inevitable justice. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee as I met her pleading eyes, and in that moment, I spoke with a calmness that chilled her to the bone. "I don't help criminals." Those words sealed their fate, and just like that, it was over. The agents escorted them out, their faces impassive, leaving behind the echo of a life that had been built on lies and treachery. As the door closed behind them, I felt a perverse sense of closure wash over me, a sense that justice, however delayed, had finally been served. I stood there, absorbing the finality of the moment, knowing that I had not only reclaimed my home and my future, but had also ensured that those who betrayed me would be forced to face the consequences of their actions, once and for all. In the aftermath of that fateful day, I embarked on the long, arduous journey of rebuilding everything that had been stolen from me. The house that had once symbolized a shared dream was, through a series of hard-fought legal battles and relentless determination, returned to my name. Every document I signed, every court order I obtained, was a small victory in the fight to reclaim not just a building, but the very essence of my future. The money, too, was gradually recovered. A painstaking process that involved tracking down every illicit transaction, every fraudulent transfer, until I had pieced together the remnants of our shattered financial security. And as for Olivia, she was gone. A ghost from a past that had once held so much promise, now reduced to a cautionary tale of betrayal and regret. With the weight of those losses slowly lifting from my shoulders, I turned my attention to the only constant that had remained true throughout all the chaos: my daughters. Sophie and Claire, whose innocence had been marred by the cruelty of events they never deserved, became my sole focus. I poured every ounce of love and determination into creating a new life for them, one where they would never again have to worry about the instability that had once threatened to upend our world. I repainted their rooms in bright, cheerful hues, replaced the remnants of broken toys with new symbols of hope, and filled our home with bedtime stories and laughter that chased away the lingering shadows of the past. Every night, as I tucked them into bed and whispered assurances that we would always be together, I felt a quiet strength begin to grow within me, a strength born not of vengeance alone, but of a profound determination to create a future that was unequivocally our own. In rebuilding my life, I rediscovered parts of myself that had lain dormant beneath the weight of betrayal, parts that craved not just retribution, but the simple, unadorned joy of starting over. I began to forge new relationships, to rediscover passions that had been suppressed in the pursuit of a dream that had turned to ash. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the scars of the past began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism that spoke of new beginnings and hard-won victories. Every brick I laid in the reconstruction of my life was imbued with the lessons of the past, a reminder that even in the face of utter devastation, one could rise again, stronger and more resolute than before. And as I looked out over the home I had painstakingly restored, I felt a sense of triumph that went far beyond mere material success. It was the triumph of a father who had vowed never to let betrayal define his destiny. I was finally building something for myself, something that was free from the toxic remnants of a love that had proven to be as fickle as it was destructive. The process was long and often painful, but with every step forward, I reclaimed a piece of my identity that had once been lost. I learned that rebuilding was not just about restoring what had been stolen, but about forging a new path where I would never again allow the past to dictate the terms of my future. And so, With the sun setting over a home that was once again mine, I embraced the future with open arms and a heart that had been tempered by fire and betrayal, a future that belonged solely to me and to the daughters I vowed to protect above all else. A year later, just as the scars of betrayal were beginning to fade into distant memories, a letter arrived at my doorstep, a final, desperate plea from Olivia that I had no intention of reading. I placed the envelope on the table and stared at it, feeling the weight of the past press in around me like a suffocating fog. I knew, without even opening the letter, that it was merely another attempt to reclaim what she had lost, a futile grasp at a love that had long since turned to ash. Instead of giving in to the lure of the past, I decided to take one final stand. I set the letter ablaze, watching the flames consume every word, every last vestige of a betrayal that had once nearly destroyed me. As the paper curled and turned to ash, I felt a profound sense of liberation, a quiet, unyielding determination that the past would no longer have a seat at my table. I raised my glass to the skyline, the city lights twinkling in a promise of new beginnings, and whispered the words that had come to define my resolve: never again. In that moment, I embraced the truth that I had finally learned. The past is a lesson, not a life sentence. I had rebuilt my home, reclaimed my finances, and above all, restored the unbreakable bond with my daughters. Olivia was now nothing more than a chapter closed, a ghost from a bygone era of betrayal and regret. And as I stepped forward into a future that was entirely my own, one built on the hard-won lessons of pain, retribution, and ultimately renewal, I vowed that I would never again allow myself to be deceived by the illusions of love. With every breath, every heartbeat, I carried the silent promise that the future would be defined not by the betrayals of the past, but by the strength and resilience of a man who had learned, through the deepest of wounds, that he was worth so much more. And so, with the night sky as my witness and the quiet hum of possibility in the air, I moved forward with my head held high, a final toast to the life I had reclaimed and a whispered promise to myself that never again would I allow the past to dictate my destiny.